Wife has been pleasuring herself every night sleeping next to me and denies it, and I've no idea how to handle it. Over the past few weeks, I 31M have noticed some changes in my wife's 30F behavior at night. We share a bed, and lately, after I've fallen asleep, I can sense her engaging in personal activity. I used to be a deep sleeper, but after cutting out alcohol, my sleep has become more typical, and I'm now more aware of my surroundings. At first, I thought it was just her being restless or moving around due to discomfort, like scratching an itch. However, when I brought it up, she gave explanations like itching her back or foot. But after some time, I started to feel more certain about what was happening. Honestly, I don't mind what she's doing, it's natural, and everyone has their own habits. The issue is that it's waking me up, and once I'm awake, I find it hard to fall back asleep. The frustrating part is when I try to talk to her about it, she denies it, gets defensive, and says I'm not trusting her. We end up going in circles, unable to have a real conversation about it. Our intimacy has also dwindled significantly. We now have sex about once every 3 to 4 weeks, whereas when we first started dating, it was a daily occurrence. She's mentioned that she's just not as interested in sex anymore, and I understand that things change. I haven't been the perfect partner either, so I don't put all the blame on her. We don't have children and don't plan on having any, but the bigger issue is the breakdown in communication. Every time I try to bring up this topic, it leads to an argument, and we can't seem to have a calm conversation without things escalating. I'm not sure how to approach this anymore. Is this normal behavior, or should I be more concerned? Please leave a comment after listening to my story. My wife did something unspeakable. Mary and I have been married for the better part of a decade now. She is the love of my life, and I wouldn't trade her for anything. The problem is, the woman who mothered my son is no longer the same. I don't mean that in a literal sense. She's alive and well, at least as well as someone can be after enduring such recent trauma. 3 weeks ago, she received devastating news from her hometown. Her parents had tragically passed away in a freak accident, carbon monoxide poisoning. This grief overtook her, rendering her unable to function. I thought things would improve after the funeral, but I found her rocking back and forth in the corner of the living room. No matter how much support I offered, I couldn't ease her pain. It got so severe that I began to fear leaving our 3-year-old son alone with her. I knew she needed professional help. One day, when she seemed more composed, I gently told her I had booked a therapy appointment at a local counseling center. She stared blankly at the wall, her mind far from our conversation, but I pressed my hand on her back, hoping to break her trance. "Honey," I asked softly. This time, she didn't lash out. Instead, she turned her gaze toward me, offering a rare, genuine smile. "Hey you," she replied in the loving tone she used to address me. I sat beside her on the floor, nervously gathering the courage to speak further. I took a deep breath. "Honey, I'm really worried about you," I said, my voice cracking with emotion. "I want to help you, but nothing I do seems to take away your pain." Her blank expression made me think my words weren't sinking in, but then she spoke. "No one can help me," she said coldly. Her eyes reflected sadness and anger, but there was also a flicker of hope as she stared back at the wall. "Only he can help me." I glanced at the wall but saw nothing but emptiness. Her words disturbed me. It became clear she was beyond anything I could do. Taking her hands, I cautiously continued. "Honey," I whispered, lifting her chin to make her face me. Her eyes, bloodshot and webbed with red vessels, remained fixated on the wall. She wasn't there with me anymore. I decided to continue sharing my plan. "There's a doctor I've heard great things about. He specializes in grief counseling. His name is Dr. Robinson. I think he could help you." Her eye twitched, but when I looked closer, I saw something unsettling, a tiny figure moving beneath the surface of her eye. As I moved closer, I noticed something wriggling inside, burrowing through her sclera. A small white insect poked through the surface, falling out of her eye onto her jeans. I picked it up. It was a maggot. I jumped back in disgust, flinging the bug away. My mind was reeling, trying to comprehend what I had just witnessed. At that moment, My son's voice echoed from the hallway. "Daddy," he called, but I was too shaken to respond properly. I looked back at my wife's face, searching for any signs of the maggot's hole, but it had vanished. Before I could examine her further, she lunged at me, biting into my cheek with horrifying strength. I screamed in pain, clutching my face as blood dripped onto my hand. My son called out again, "Daddy, can I eat this little jelly bean?" Without thinking, I absent-mindedly replied, "Yes, sure, buddy," only to be struck by the horrifying realization of what he was holding. I turned just in time to see my son about to swallow a maggot, like the one that had fallen from his mother's eye. "No, stop," I screamed, rushing to him and forcing his mouth open. The maggot lay on my palm, cut in half by his small teeth. "But Mommy lets me have the little white jelly beans when you're at work," he said. My skin crawled as the words hit me. My wife, now mumbling to herself, repeated the same eerie phrase, "Little white jelly beans, little white jelly beans." That's when I knew I couldn't leave her alone with our son any longer. I had no choice but to admit her to a mental hospital. It was for everyone's safety. She resisted, screaming as they took her away, accusing me of betraying her, cursing me with chilling threats. For a while, things were calm at home. I took time off to be with Tommy, but one day, I saw him whispering to the same wall Mary had been so fixated on. Panic gripped me. "Buddy, what are you doing?" I asked, but he kept whispering. Finally, I heard him say, "Yeah, they're really good." "I can ask." He turned to me, smiling. "Daddy, do you like jelly beans?" I froze as I saw his small hands filled with wriggling maggots. I knocked them out of his hands, demanding to know where he had gotten them. "The man said they were from Grandma and Grandpa," he replied, pointing at the wall. My heart sank. "There's no man, Tommy," I insisted, but he was certain. "There is. He promised Mommy he'd bring Grandma and Grandpa back. He just needs one thing." "What does he want?" I asked, my voice trembling. Tommy looked me in the eye and said, "You." Suddenly, a shadow emerged from the wall, beckoning me to follow it into the bedroom. Tommy clung to my leg, but his words chilled me. "The man says we'll all be together soon." I refused to go, but Tommy darted toward the bedroom, disappearing into the dark. I followed, only to find my deceased in-laws standing in the moonlight, decayed and crawling with maggots. The shadowy figure towered behind them, its skeletal hand outstretched toward me. I flipped on the light, and the figure vanished, but my in-laws remained, their rotting bodies teeming with maggots. Tommy excitedly picked one up and ate it, oblivious to the horror unfolding. "Daddy, the man says you have to go with him now," Tommy said as a bony hand gripped my shoulder from behind. I grabbed Tommy, fleeing to the bathroom, locking the door behind us. "Now, we're hiding here, waiting for daylight." But Tommy keeps repeating that I belong to the man. I'm terrified. I think my wife made a deal with something far worse than death. What do I do? Please leave a comment after listening to my story. Am I wrong for confronting my husband after he stared at my best friend during our anniversary dinner? My husband 35M and I 33F have been married for 5 years, and last week we went out for a special dinner to celebrate our anniversary. It was meant to be a romantic evening, but I invited my best friend, Sarah 34F, to join us because she has been going through a challenging divorce. She has been my closest friend for over a decade, and I didn't think twice about including her. After all, we've always been close, and my husband has never had an issue with her before. Here's where things took a turn. The moment Sarah walked in, I noticed my husband's eyes light up. Now, I've always known Sarah as attractive, tall, curvy, blonde, with that magnetic confidence that turns heads. But this was the first time I'd ever seen my husband so openly admire her. He was looking at her legs, watching her every time she leaned forward, and at one point, he even complimented her dress in a way that made me feel uncomfortable. It wasn't just a quick glance. He was staring, all night long. The worst part, when Sarah excused herself to go to the restroom, he made a comment about how any guy would be lucky to have her and even joked that if he were single, he'd give her a chance. I laughed it off at the moment, but inside, I felt crushed. This was our anniversary dinner, and my husband couldn't even focus on me. After we got home, I confronted him. I told him how disrespected I felt, especially given the timing and the fact that Sarah is my best friend. He brushed it off and said I was being jealous and insecure, that it's just harmless looking, and that it doesn't mean anything. He even had the audacity to say, "Well, you're always telling me how attractive she is, so how's that different?" I couldn't believe he turned it around on me. Sure, I've mentioned how appealing Sarah is, but that doesn't mean it's an invitation for him to gaze at her, especially right in front of me. Now, I'm questioning if I overreacted. He thinks I'm making a big deal out of this, but I can't shake the feeling that he completely disrespected me, and I'm starting to wonder if there's more behind his behavior. Am I wrong for getting upset, or am I really just being insecure like he says? Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Wishing you good health if you like this video.